The goodbye that wasn't one. I still remember that morning. The faint hum of rolling suitcases, the chatter of strangers, the smell of airport coffee blending with jet fuel. It was supposed to be the start of a beautiful trip. My first real vacation in years. My son, Daniel, had planned everything, or so I believed. He and his wife, Lauren, were all smiles when they picked me up that morning. Lauren's perfume filled the car, sweet but sharp, almost like the scent had a hidden edge, just like her. "You're going to love this, Mom," Daniel said, adjusting the rearview mirror. "It's time you finally relax." Relax? That word felt foreign to me. After a lifetime of raising a family, managing a home, and surviving loss, relaxation always came last. Still I smiled. I trusted them. They were my family. We arrived at the airport 2 hours early. Daniel parked in the short-term lot, saying it would be easier for me. I remember thanking him for thinking ahead, for being considerate. Little did I know, that was the last kindness he'd show me for a long time. Lauren wheeled my suitcase beside me as we walked in. "You have your passport, right, Margaret?" she asked, using my first name. Something about the way she said it always stung. Not, Mom. Just, Margaret. Like I was a stranger renting space in her life. "Yes, dear," I said, forcing a small laugh. "I've got everything." They guided me to the check-in counter. "We'll just grab some coffee before security," Daniel said. "We'll meet you at gate B7. He handed me my boarding pass, printed and folded neatly, and smiled, the way he used to when he was little and wanted to hide something. I thought nothing of it then. That smile had always been my weakness. I checked my bag, walked through security, and waited. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. Then an hour. I called Daniel. No answer. Texted him. No reply. Finally, I went to the gate desk. "Excuse me," I said softly. "My son and daughter-in-law were supposed to meet me here, but I can't seem to reach them." The attendant smiled politely, checked the system, then looked back at me with confusion. "Ma'am, are you traveling to Phoenix?" "Yes." "There's no ticket for you under this reservation. Only two, Daniel and Lauren Cooper." The world seemed to tilt. My fingers went cold. I opened the folded boarding pass he'd given me. It wasn't a real ticket. It was an old itinerary, printed weeks ago. That's when the first realization hit me. I wasn't part of their trip. I was the baggage they left behind. My heart pounded. I stepped away from the counter, clutching my purse like a lifeline. I called Daniel again. Straight to voicemail. My own son. The boy I'd raised alone after his father died. The child I sacrificed everything for. I sat down at a bench by the window, watching planes take off one by one. The sound of engines roaring felt cruel. Everyone else was leaving, moving forward, while I sat there, abandoned. I must have stayed like that for an hour, maybe more. I didn't even notice the tears until the woman beside me offered a tissue. "Are you okay, ma'am?" she asked gently. I nodded, lying through my shaking lips. "Yes, just tired." Tired. Not of travel, of love taken for granted. When I finally stepped outside, the sun had already risen higher. My suitcase was gone. I checked everywhere. The entrance, the security line, even the parking area. But then I saw it. My name tag, torn off and left near a trash bin. They'd taken everything. The car, my luggage, and soon, I'd learn even my house. That evening, I took a cab home. The driver kept glancing at me in the mirror. I could tell he wanted to ask why an old woman was crying silently in the back seat, clutching an empty purse. I didn't have an answer yet. When we turned onto my street, something felt off. My mailbox was gone. The flower pots I'd placed by the door, missing. Then, when I reached the gate, my heart stopped. A for sale sign stood in front of my house. I stumbled closer, reading the fine print. Pending sale. My name wasn't on the sign, Daniel's wuss. He'd listed my home. The house his father built. The place I raised him in. Gone, just like that. I remember whispering, "No, no, this can't be real." But it was. And as the wind rustled through the trees that night, I realized my son hadn't just abandoned me at an airport. He'd erased me from his life. Or so he thought. Because what Daniel and Lauren didn't know was that the paper I signed months earlier wasn't just a transfer document. It was something far more powerful, and it was about to change everything. The paper they forgot about. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face at the airport, the way he smiled as he walked away, as if he were finally free of me. The clock ticked past 2 a.m., the house eerily silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. It no longer felt like home. It felt like a stranger's shell waiting to be emptied. I sat at the kitchen table with the only thing I had left, an old photo album. Each page whispered reminders of the years I'd traded for love. Daniel's first day at school, the time his father built that swing in the backyard, our last Christmas before everything changed. Somewhere between those memories, I noticed the envelope. It was wedged between two photos, marked with my late husband's handwriting. Property deed, keep safe. My heart thudded. That was the envelope I'd signed months ago when Daniel insisted we update the documents. He'd said, "It's just paperwork, Mom, so we can handle things for you if something happens." At the time, it felt caring. Now it felt like the setup to my own erasure. I opened the envelope. Inside were two sheets, the original deed and a new one that I barely remembered signing. I held them side by side under the lamplight. The ink had faded, but one thing stood out. My signature wasn't on the transfer line. It was on a trust agreement. Daniel must have thought I'd transferred ownership to him. But I hadn't. The house still belonged to me. My chest tightened, not from relief, but from the sting of realizing how deeply they'd underestimated me. I wasn't just an old woman to be tricked. I was the same woman who'd worked 3 jobs to keep this family afloat. And if they thought I'd quietly disappear, they were wrong. By morning, I had a plan. I called my friend and neighbor, Helen, who'd lived 2 doors down since Daniel was a toddler. "Helen," I whispered, "do you still have the number of that real estate attorney you mentioned last Christmas?" Her voice came through groggy but concerned. "Margaret? What happened?" "I just need to check something about the deed. Please, don't tell anyone." Within hours, I was sitting in a small downtown office that smelled of old books and coffee. The lawyer, Mr. Riley, was a soft-spoken man in his 60s. He adjusted his glasses and studied the papers. After a few moments, he looked up with quiet astonishment. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, "this isn't a transfer of ownership. It's a life estate trust. That means no one can sell this property without your approval. The buyer's contract would be invalid." I exhaled, trembling. "So, they can't take it?" He shook his head. "Not legally." For the first time in 24 hours, I felt something other than despair. It was faint but alive, a spark of control. "Should I confront them?" I asked. He leaned back. "If you do, they'll try to manipulate you again. Gather proof first. Let them reveal themselves." When I left his office, the sun felt warmer than it had the day before. I walked slower, letting the light touch my face. Daniel and Lauren had planned everything perfectly, except for one thing. They'd built their scheme on assumptions, not facts. I spent the rest of the day quietly documenting everything. Screenshots of listings, copies of emails, and the messages Daniel had sent me in the weeks leading up to the vacation. Reading them now, every word dripped with pretense. "We'll handle it, Mom. You can trust us." Trust. The word cut deeper each time. By evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel, "Hey, hope you got home safe. We'll call tomorrow." No apology. No mention of the airport. I stared at the screen, 1,000 replies swirling in my head, but I typed only 2 words, "We need to talk." Hours passed without a response. Then, near midnight, Lauren called. Her voice was sugar-coated, the way it always was when she wanted control. "Oh, Margaret. We've been so worried. Daniel's been busy sorting the paperwork. Everything's almost finalized." "Finalized?" I asked calmly. Yes, she said brightly. The house sale. You'll love the new place we found for you. I could hear Daniel whispering in the background. They still thought I didn't know. Well, I replied softly, I'm glad you handled it. But before you sign anything else, maybe you should double-check the documents. She laughed, light, dismissive. You don't have to worry about that. Oh, I'm not worried, I said. Not anymore. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from focus. They were still trying to outsmart me, but they didn't realize the game had already changed. I spent the next morning scanning copies of every document and emailing them to Mr. Riley. He responded quickly, keep quiet for now. Let them proceed. We'll be ready. For the next week, I lived two lives, quiet and polite when Daniel called, sharp and calculating when he didn't. I let him think I was fragile, confused, grateful. The truth? I was watching, waiting, preparing. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope bore Daniel's handwriting again. Inside was a printed notice of vacate. He'd actually sent his own mother an eviction notice. My knees nearly gave out, but as I sank into the armchair, a strange calm washed over me. They were confident enough to write it down, exactly what I needed. I placed the notice beside the original deed, aligned their corners perfectly, and smiled for the first time in days. The pieces were falling into place. They thought they'd left me behind at an airport. But soon, they'd learn I was already boarding my own flight, a one-way trip toward their downfall. The calm before the storm. For the next few days, I lived as if nothing had happened. Every morning I brewed my tea, opened the curtains, and pretended the world outside was still the same. But inside me, something had shifted. The part of me that once begged to be loved had gone silent. What remained was focus. Cold, deliberate focus. Daniel and Lauren called occasionally, their voices cheerful and mechanical. Lauren's favorite line was, "We just want what's best for you, Margaret." She always said my name like it was a title, not a bond. Daniel, on the other hand, spoke less. I could hear the guilt buried under his politeness, like a note slightly off-key in a song. By the fourth day, I knew they were close to finalizing the sale. The for sale sign now had a red banner stretched across it, under contract. Neighbors had begun to ask questions. "Are you moving, Margaret?" one of them asked as I collected my mail. I smiled gently. "Not yet. Just a bit of family rearranging." Inside, I was preparing for something far greater than a move. I was preparing for truth. Mr. Riley, my attorney, had been keeping track of every legal document Daniel and Lauren had submitted. They're using falsified power of attorney forms, he told me over the phone. "Don't worry. We'll let them hang themselves with their own rope." That phrase stayed with me. They were digging their own grave, one forged signature at a time. On the fifth day, I visited the house quietly. The realtor, a young woman in a sharp gray suit, was showing it to a couple. She didn't recognize me. "This is a lovely property," she said, smiling, "recently listed by the owners. The paperwork is nearly done." Owners. The word burned. I walked through the open door as if I were a stranger visiting a museum of my own life. The smell of lemon polish filled the air, masking the scent of home that once lingered. Sunday dinners, birthday candles, Daniel's laughter echoing down the hallway. The couple admired the living room. I, meanwhile, ran my hand over the mantel, tracing the faint ring where a photo frame used to sit. The house felt hollow, like it was holding its breath. When they left, I stayed behind, pretending to look for a misplaced earring. As soon as the realtor stepped outside to take a call, I slipped into my study. The drawers were still there, untouched. I found the small USB drive my husband used years ago, the one with every financial record, every receipt, and, more importantly, the original deed files. It felt like I was holding a weapon made of truth. That night, I plugged it into my old laptop. The screen flickered and there it was, everything. Proof that the property had never been transferred, records of my late husband's trust, and the clause Daniel never knew existed. In the event of fraudulent sale or transfer, all rights revert solely to the surviving spouse. It was all there, written in legal black and white. My fingers trembled as I took screenshots, saved copies, and emailed them to Mr. Riley. He replied almost instantly, "Perfect. Do not tell them anything yet. We'll wait until they close the deal, then step in." So I waited. And while I waited, I played my part perfectly. When Daniel called the next day, I let my voice tremble just enough to sound old and harmless. "How are you, Mom?" he asked cautiously. "Oh, I'm fine, dear," I said, letting out a sigh. "I've just been resting. Did you two enjoy your trip?" There was a pause. "Yeah," he said, voice uncertain. "We'll visit soon." "Take your time," I replied, smiling to myself. "I'm not going anywhere." After we hung up, I laughed quietly, not the kind of laughter that comes from joy, but the kind that spills out when pain starts to lose its power. They had no idea the storm I was about to unleash. A few evenings later, Helen came over. She brought me apple pie, like she always did when things got heavy. "I saw Lauren outside earlier," she said, lowering her voice. She looked nervous. Kept checking her phone. "Good," I murmured. "She should be nervous." Helen gave me a look. "You're planning something, aren't you?" I smiled. "Just tying up loose ends." The next morning, the realtor's car was parked outside again. I watched from the kitchen window as Daniel and Lauren stood by the porch, papers in hand. Lauren was in her sharpest blazer, her hair perfectly done. Daniel looked uncomfortable. His eyes darted toward the house again and again. I could almost hear his thoughts. What if Mom finds out? But he didn't know that Mom already had. When they finally drove off, I called Mr. Riley. "It's happening," I said. "Good," he replied. "Stay put. Once the sale is finalized, I'll deliver the notice. Let them think they've won." So I waited again, another quiet evening in the house that was still mine. The clock ticked steadily, the same rhythm it had kept since my husband built it. And as I sat there, I realized how poetic it all was. The home they tried to steal would be the stage for their own downfall. I poured myself a cup of tea and looked at the reflection in the window. The woman staring back wasn't broken anymore. She was ready. They thought I was too old to fight back. But I'd spent a lifetime learning that silence was a weapon, and now I was ready to use it. The papers they shouldn't have signed. 3 days later, a pale morning sun slipped through the blinds. The birds outside were chirping as if nothing monumental was happening, as if the world hadn't just turned upside down. I sat in my living room, tea untouched, eyes fixed on the ticking clock. At exactly 9:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. A short text from Daniel. "Everything went through. We'll come by later." That was all. No exclamation mark. No, "love you." Just went through. I smiled to myself. Yes, I thought it did. But not the way you believe. At 10 a.m., Mr. Riley called. His voice carried that mix of calm excitement lawyers get when they know they're about to win. "It's done," he said. "They closed the deal this morning. You can expect company soon." "And the documents?" "Already filed. They sold what they didn't own. It's officially classified as fraudulent conveyance." "Perfect," I said quietly. I hung up and looked around the house one last time. The photos, the creaking floorboards, the scent of lavender polish. This was no longer just a home. It was evidence. Around noon, a black sedan rolled into the driveway. Daniel stepped out first, followed by Lauren in her expensive heels, holding a manila folder. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but her smirk gave everything away. "Mom," she called too sweetly. "Big day." I opened the door slowly, letting the light hit her face. "So I've heard," I said. She laughed. "Oh, come now, don't be bitter. It's for the best. You'll thank us when you're settled somewhere more manageable." Daniel kept his head down. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I motioned for them to come inside. "You must be thirsty," I said. "Tea." Lauren waved a hand. "No, we're good. We just need you to sign one last paper for the title office." "Oh. Standard closing procedure," she said smoothly, flipping through the folder. "You know, just to finalize everything." I tilted my head. "I see. And you're sure this is necessary?" She smiled wider. "Absolutely." I watched her pull out the form, her perfectly manicured finger pointing to the signature line. the same gesture she'd used the day she tricked me at the airport. I took the pen and instead of signing, I slid the paper back across the table. "Actually," I said, my tone soft, "I think you should take that up with my attorney." Lauren's smile flickered. "Excuse me?" Mr. Riley walked in from the hallway. I'd invited him earlier, told him to wait until I gave the signal. His presence hit them like a cold gust of wind. "Afternoon," he said, setting a thick folder on the table. "I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Reynolds." Lauren blinked. What is this?" He opened the folder slowly. Proof of fraudulent property transfer. Multiple forged documents. And, for good measure, a revocation of every authorization you two ever touched. Daniel's face drained of color. "Mom, what is this?" I looked at him evenly. "It's me, protecting what your father and I built." Lauren tried to recover, her voice sharp. "This is ridiculous. We followed procedure." Mr. Riley's tone remained polite but cutting. "Then I'm sure the district attorney will find your signatures interesting." He slid a printed copy of the trust clause across the table. "This line here, you see it? In the event of fraudulent sale or transfer, all rights revert solely to the surviving spouse. That means her. Not you." The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Daniel ran a shaky hand through his hair. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said softly. "That's the saddest part." Lauren's face twisted, anger replacing fear. "You can't do this." "Oh, I already did," I said. "The sale is void. The funds you received are being reversed. And the buyers? They've been notified." She stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. "This isn't over." Mr. Riley smiled thinly. "It is, actually." They left without another word. The front door slammed, rattling the picture frames on the wall. I exhaled slowly, every muscle in my body trembling from holding back months of hurt. Helen showed up an hour later, holding a newspaper. "You might want to see this," she said. The local real estate column already had the headline, "High-value home sale halted after fraud investigation." Underneath, a blurry photo of my house. And just below it, Daniel and Lauren, faces caught mid-shock. I sat back, letting the weight of the moment sink in. The house was mine, legally, emotionally, completely. But victory didn't feel like celebration. It felt like closure. That night, as rain began to fall outside, I wrote in my journal for the first time in years. Justice doesn't shout. It waits, then speaks once, and everyone listens. I closed the book, smiled faintly, and whispered to the quiet room, "He would have been proud, you know." The thunder outside answered like distant applause. The cost of greed. 4 days after the confrontation, the phone didn't stop ringing. Neighbors, lawyers, reporters, everyone wanted a statement. I didn't answer a single call. I didn't need to. The truth had already spoken for me. The local paper ran the story for a week straight. Each headline seemed sharper than the last. Son and daughter-in-law under investigation for fraud. Elderly widow outsmarts family in $2.8 million property scam. I read the articles quietly at my kitchen table, the same place where I'd once poured tea for Daniel as a boy. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same table where he'd done his homework was now the one holding the evidence of his downfall. The internet wasn't kind either. Social media took the story and ran wild with it. Some called me a heroic mother. Others just said I was the woman who refused to be fooled. I didn't want fame, just peace. But peace has a strange way of arriving when you stop chasing it. By the third day, Daniel came to the house. He didn't knock right away. I watched from behind the curtain as he stood in the rain, hands deep in his pockets, head down. When he finally did knock, it was timid, like a child again. I opened the door slowly. He looked nothing like the confident man who once spoke to me with quiet arrogance. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes sunken. "Mom," he said softly, "can I come in?" I hesitated, then nodded. He stepped inside and looked around. Everything was the same, but the air between us was different, heavier. "I messed up," he whispered. I didn't know what she was doing, not completely. I thought it was just a transfer to make things easier. I folded my arms. Easier for who? He looked away. For us. For me. There was the truth, bare and fragile. I lost everything, he continued. The buyers pulled out, Lauren's gone, and the authorities froze my accounts. He gave a small, bitter laugh. You were right. Greed doesn't just cost money, it takes everything. For a long time I said nothing. I just watched him, seeing not the man who betrayed me, but the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard. Finally I sighed. You should sit down. He did. I poured him tea the same way I always had. The sound of the liquid hitting porcelain filled the silence between us. He stared at his cup, then at me. How did you know? Because I listened, I said simply. You stopped listening to yourself a long time ago. He nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, I said. Because forgiveness isn't given, it's earned. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the windows like applause for an invisible performance. He wiped his eyes, his voice shaking. What will happen to me? That depends on what you do next, I replied. The law will handle its part. But what you rebuild, that's yours to decide. We sat in silence for a while. Then, quietly, I reached into the drawer and pulled out an envelope. He looked at it, confused. This is for you, I said. It's not money, Daniel. It's a letter your father wrote before he died. I found it years ago, but I never showed it to you. Maybe it's time. He opened it slowly, hands trembling. Inside was a single page, written in my husband's neat handwriting. Son, if life ever tests you, remember this. Wealth built on betrayal will burn faster than paper. But love, even broken, can rebuild stronger than stone. Daniel's tears fell freely now. He folded the letter carefully and held it to his chest. I don't deserve this, he said. No, I agreed softly. But you needed it. That was the first time in months I saw something real in his eyes. Not pride, not guilt, but remorse. A week later, the investigation wrapped up. Mr. Riley called to tell me that, given my request, the charges wouldn't include jail time. Are you sure? He asked. You could push for it. I'm sure, I said. Let him carry the weight, not the sentence. When I told Helen, she looked surprised. You're letting him go? I smiled faintly. Sometimes letting go hurts less than holding on. In the days that followed, the story slowly disappeared from headlines. People found new gossip, new scandals. But Daniel didn't vanish. He started volunteering at a local shelter, rebuilding small parts of himself piece by piece. Occasionally, he'd stop by the house, never uninvited, always polite. He didn't talk much. Sometimes we just shared a quiet meal, saying more in silence than words ever could. One evening, as he was leaving, he turned to me and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I looked at him for a long moment. I almost did, I admitted. But your father wouldn't have wanted that. He smiled faintly, the same smile he had as a boy. Then he left, his car's taillights fading down the wet road. When the door closed, I exhaled, not in relief, but in release. Everything had come full circle. The house was quiet again, but not empty. It was alive with memories that no signature could erase. That night, I sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. For the first time in a long while, I whispered a prayer, not for revenge, but for peace. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't destroying the ones who wronged you. It's proving that they couldn't destroy you. What remains after the storm? A month passed before I realized how quiet the house had become. No more phone calls, no whispers from curious neighbors, no echoes of arguments bouncing off the walls. Just silence, soft, clean, healing silence. Every morning, I opened the curtains and let the light in. For years, I'd lived in the shadow of what my family had done. But now, sunlight felt different. It wasn't a reminder of what I'd lost. It was proof that life goes on even after the storm tears through it. Daniel called once a week now. Sometimes he'd come by on Sundays to mow the lawn or fix something around the house. He never asked for money, never brought up what happened. We spoke about small things, the weather, the garden, the new family that moved next door. Those little conversations felt like stitches closing a wound that had once seemed impossible to heal. One afternoon, I was watering the flowers when Helen called out from across the fence. "Margaret, they're writing about you again." I turned, amused. "Oh dear, what now?" She hurried over, newspaper in hand, excitement in her eyes. The headline read, "Woman who exposed family fraud donates to community trust fund." I smiled. It wasn't meant to be news. "Well, it is," Helen said proudly. "You've become a local legend." After everything, I'd taken a portion of the settlement money and donated it to the town's community home project, the same one my late husband used to support. It felt right. It felt like closing the loop. That evening, I attended the small opening ceremony at the new shelter. The mayor said a few kind words, and the local paper took photos. I stood at the edge of the crowd, unnoticed, watching families step into their new rooms with tears in their eyes. It wasn't about redemption, it was about restoration. When you give, you rebuild more than walls. You rebuild hope. Daniel showed up quietly at the end of the ceremony. He looked around, eyes soft, unsure if he should approach. I nodded and he walked over. "I saw what you did," he said. "Dad would have loved this." I smiled faintly. It was his idea long before it was mine. For a moment, we stood in silence, watching the children run down the hallway of the new shelter. "You've changed," I said finally. He exhaled. "I had to. The man I was before, he was lost. I don't want to be him again." I nodded. "Good. Because you can't fix the past, but you can outgrow it." Later that night, I found myself walking through the house, tracing my fingers over the framed photographs that lined the hallway. Some were faded, some cracked. But they all told the same story, of love, of mistakes, of forgiveness that didn't come easy but came anyway. When I reached my husband's photo, I paused. "I did it," I whispered. "It's over now." For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger or grief. Just peace, deep and quiet, like the still water of a lake after a storm. A few weeks later, Helen convinced me to attend the town's annual fair. I hadn't gone in years. The air smelled of popcorn and laughter, and for the first time, I didn't feel out of place. People recognized me, not with pity, but with respect. "Mrs. Reynolds," one woman said, "you're an inspiration. You reminded us not to let anyone take advantage of kindness." I smiled softly. "Kindness isn't weakness," I told her. "It's just strength most people don't understand." That night, as I walked home under the streetlights, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, belonging. Not to people, not to a house, but to myself. A few days later, Daniel came by again. He brought a small box. "I wanted you to have this," he said. Inside was an old photograph, the three of us years ago at the lake. My husband smiling wide, Daniel with his arm around me, all of us carefree. "I found it in storage," he said. "Thought you'd want it back." I held it for a long moment. "So many things we forget," I murmured. "And yet, some memories find their way home." He nodded. "I'm trying, Mom." "I know," I said. "And that's enough for now." Before he left, he hesitated. "Do you still hate her, Lauren?" I looked out the window, thinking. "Hate is heavy," I said finally. "I've carried enough of it. Let her live with what she's done. That's punishment enough." He nodded slowly. "You're stronger than I'll ever be." I smiled. "Not stronger. Just older, and tired of fighting." That night, I placed the photo on the mantel. The same mantel where it had once stood before all the chaos began. The house felt complete again, not because it was whole, but because I was. As I sat in my armchair, the rain began once more, gentle this time, like a lullaby instead of a warning. I closed my eyes and let it play. The world outside moved on. But here, in this quiet little house, peace had finally found a home. And as I drifted into sleep, one thought echoed softly in my mind. Sometimes life takes everything from you, just to show you what truly matters. The years that followed. Time has a strange way of healing, not quickly, not completely, but steadily, like waves smoothing the sharp edges of broken glass. It's been nearly 5 years since that storm tore through my life. The house is still mine, the garden still blooms, but everything inside me feels different. The anger that once lived in my chest has long since packed its bags and left. What remains now is peace, the kind that comes from understanding that pain, too, has a purpose. I wake up early every morning. The world feels lighter at dawn. I make my tea, open the windows, and let the morning air drift through the curtains. Sometimes, I still half expect Daniel to walk in like he used to, head down, mumbling an apology for being late for breakfast. And sometimes he does come. But not as the son who betrayed me. As the man who learned what love costs when you take it for granted. He visits often now, not out of obligation but care. We've built something new, not the same as before, but honest. He'll fix a broken hinge, help with groceries, or just sit with me in the garden as we talk about his new life. He works for a local housing charity now, the same one the shelter donation helped start. Funny how life loops around, always finding its way back to the truth. He says it's his way of making peace with what he did. And maybe it is. The town hasn't forgotten either. Every now and then, someone recognizes me at the market. "You're Mrs. Reynolds, aren't you? The one from that story?" I smile politely. That was a long time ago. They usually nod, then say something kind, about courage, or standing up for yourself, or the power of mothers. But they never really know the whole story. They don't know the nights I cried myself to sleep, or the mornings when I didn't want to get out of bed. They see the ending, not the journey. That's why, a year ago, I started writing it all down. Not for a book, not for fame, but for myself. I call it The Deed I Signed. It's not about revenge or betrayal. It's about lessons. About how love, when twisted by greed, can break, but how truth can still rebuild what's left. I write a few pages every morning in my old study, with the same pen my husband used when he wrote his letters. Sometimes I imagine him there beside me, nodding quietly, proud. Last month, I attended the wedding of one of the volunteers from the shelter. It was held in the same park where Daniel used to play as a child. The laughter, the music, the smell of spring, it all felt familiar. Daniel was there too, helping with the setup. When the ceremony began, he looked at me across the aisle and smiled. For the first time, I didn't see regret in his eyes. I saw peace. Afterward, as the sun began to set, he walked me to my car. "Do you ever think about her?" he asked quietly. "Lauren." He nodded. "Sometimes," I said. "But not with hate anymore. I hope she found her own lessons too." He smiled faintly. "You're kinder than I deserve." I placed my hand on his. "Maybe. But that's how mothers love, even when they shouldn't." As the years passed, life became quieter but richer. I started teaching part-time at the community center, creative writing for seniors. I tell them, you don't need a perfect life to tell a good story. You just need truth. They laugh, they cry, they share their own tales, and in every one of them, I find pieces of my own journey. The house, once a battlefield, is now a sanctuary again. The walls hold no bitterness, only memories. The garden blooms brighter each spring. The roses my husband planted have grown wild, climbing the fence like they're reaching for freedom. Sometimes, in the evenings, I sit by the window and watch the lights flicker across town. From here, I can see the shelter, the one that bears a small plaque near the entrance. Built from truth, in memory of Edward and Margaret Reynolds. Daniel had it installed on the project's 5th anniversary. When I first saw it, I cried. Not because of the words, but because of what they meant. Not just survival, transformation. Last week, I found an old video Daniel had saved on his phone. It was of me from years ago, before everything happened. I was in the kitchen, laughing, scolding him for leaving dishes undone. The sound of that laughter startled me. It felt like hearing someone I used to know. Someone lighter, freer. And for the first time in years, I laughed like that again. I think healing is just remembering who you were before life tried to break you, and choosing to be that person again, even if it hurts. Tonight, as I sit at my desk, I write the final chapter of The Deed I Signed. Outside, the wind hums softly, and the moon spills its silver light across the pages. I write the last line slowly, carefully. They took my house, but they couldn't take my home, because home isn't made of bricks. It's made of strength, truth, and the courage to begin again. I close the notebook, blow out the candle, and whisper to the empty room, "We did it, Edward. We really did." The clock ticks gently in reply. And for the first time, I feel that the story, my story, has finally found its ending. The letter I never sent. There's a quiet that comes after forgiveness. Not empty, not cold, just still. It's the kind of silence that doesn't ache anymore. The kind that feels like peace. It's been 7 years since everything changed. The house stands proudly at the end of Willow Lane, not for its size or worth, but for the story it carries. The story of a mother who lost everything she thought she needed, only to find what truly mattered. This morning, I sat by the same oak desk where I signed the deed all those years ago. Only this time, I wasn't giving anything away. I was writing a letter, the one I never sent. To my children, it begins. By the time you read this, I hope life has been kind to you. I hope you've known love that stays and forgiveness that heals. I never wanted revenge. I wanted understanding. You see, a home isn't built from walls, it's built from moments. And sometimes, those moments collapse, not because we stop loving, but because we forget what love means. The ink bleeds a little on the paper. My hands tremble more these days, but the words come easily now. They've been waiting for years. I forgave you long before you ever asked, I write. Because holding anger was like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to fall. I pause, looking out the window. The sun is setting, warm gold spilling across the garden. It looks just like it did the night Daniel came back for the first time. That same quiet promise in the air, that maybe, just maybe, broken things can bloom again. I remember the moment I realized I was free. It wasn't when I got the house back. It wasn't even when the apology finally came. It was when I stopped replaying the hurt in my mind. When I realized that the past is a place to visit, not to live. That's when I started writing again. That's when I started living again. And now, as I sign my name at the bottom of this letter, I realize it's not just a message for them. It's a message for anyone who's ever been left behind. Life will hand you moments that shatter your heart, sometimes from people you'd have sworn never would. You'll want to scream, to curse, to give up. But if you can hold on, if you can just breathe through the storm, you'll find something waiting on the other side. Your strength, your peace, yourself. That's the part no one can steal. I placed the letter in a small box, the same box that once held the house keys and the old deed. Inside it now are memories. My husband's watch, a faded photo, the garden gloves I used when I rebuilt the yard, and a single rose I pressed from the first bloom that grew after they left. I seal it gently. On the lid, I write 3 words in black ink, for when you're ready. One day, maybe Daniel or Emily will find it. Maybe they'll open it when they're older, wiser, when life has taught them its own lessons. And maybe, when they read it, they'll understand the one truth I finally learned. Love doesn't mean staying silent. It means standing tall, even when your voice trembles. Later that night, I light a single candle on the porch. The wind hums softly through the trees, carrying the scent of rain. The same kind of night it was when everything began. Except this time, I'm not waiting for anyone to come home. Because home isn't a place. It's a feeling. And I carry it with me now, wherever I go. The candle flickers, steady, alive. Somewhere in the distance, church bells echo faintly through the hills. And for a brief, perfect moment, I feel my husband's presence beside me again, warm, proud, silent. Tomorrow, the shelter will celebrate its 10th anniversary. They've invited me to speak, not as a victim, but as a founder. They said, "Mrs. Reynolds, you started something that's changed hundreds of lives." And I smiled. Because I didn't start it out of strength. I started it out of pain. That's the secret no one tells you. Sometimes, your greatest heartbreak becomes the soil for something beautiful. As I blow out the candle, I whisper into the night. It's over. But it mattered. Because that's what every ending truly is, not a door closing, but a story finally told. I close my eyes, listening to the soft rain begin to fall, the same sound that once echoed through that empty house. Except now, it doesn't sound lonely. It sounds like music. Like closure. And somewhere deep inside, I know, the deed I signed may have given away a house, but it also gave me back my soul.